Good evening, everybody. This is Photography Live and Uncut once again. I hope you got that first bit. It's just flagged up.
Yes, I did.
I'll start again. Good evening, everybody. This is Photography Live and Uncut again, Friday at 8 o'clock. I've dragged him out of the dark room. This is an amazing guest I got today. I'm absolutely delighted. I can't even begin to think of how I'm going to introduce him except to say, Michael Kenna. I can't believe
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to my show. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. You're so busy. This is
great pleasure.
Ridiculous, the amount of traveling you're doing. You're going to Paris next week, then you're going to London, then you're going to Dusseldorf. Michael, when do you get time to just relax?
Right now, this is relaxing.
in the dark room, so you relax, yeah?
I always think that life is extremely short, so you've really got to pack it in.
Yeah, very true. Very true indeed.
I try not to waste any minute if possible, but I do get to relax. I have my family here. We do things together, and some of the traveling. I actually relax on planes. 12-hour journey is relaxation for me. I get to read a book, watch a movie, have a few drinks, go to sleep. It's not so bad.
No,
it's a good life.
Fantastic, but it is. It sounds absolutely superb. I'm going to say Widnes to Seattle is such a is like poles apart. So we're going to try and condense this. Born in Widnes, studied there, then you studied printing in London. How did that develop? How did you get into printing? Was photography something which led you to printing, or does printing lead you to photography?
Not that. They're both in the Northwest. They just happen to be in different countries. The weather's about the same.
That's
it's kind
true,
of raining right now.
Yeah.
It's a long story, but from Widnes, at an early age, I decided I wanted to be a Catholic priest, which may sound a bit bizarre, but I went to a seminary school. I had a decent education. I decided, maybe that wasn't a great idea. And the only thing I seemed to be decent at was art. So I went on to an art school in Banbury for 1 year. And then I went on to study photography in London for 3 years. And from there, I worked as an assistant for a while, and eventually I came over to the States. There's many reasons, but I got over to the States. I was in Seattle, I was in New York, I was in San Francisco, and eventually I stayed in San Francisco for a few years. And I got a job working for Ruth Bernhard.
Well, this is what I was going to come to, actually, because that's what I'm not really familiar with Ruth Bernhard's work until I looked at it today, and I thought, it's a little bit risque for this time, though. But how influential was working with Ruth for you and your future photographic career?
Well, she was amazing. Many levels, professional and personal also. She was this vibrant woman who had made it on her own, basically, in photography in a time when photography really wasn't that well received. She taught all her life. She photographed all her life. She really introduced the whole kind of gallery, museum, kind of business side of the arts to me. She, basically showed me how to print, even though I thought I knew how to print. I'd worked as a professional printer, but, the more photographers you work for, the more different ways of printing you find. It's a bit like, playing a musical instrument. There's just, you have to be doing it for many, many years to really get into it. So she just showed me how to print. And I worked with her on and off for almost 10 years. I'm a really amazing woman, amazing photographer, very, very influential on me. Yeah. And her big thing was just always say yes. Whatever happens, just say yes. And 99 times out of 100, it'll be perfect. Occasionally, it gets you into trouble, but most times, that's a good advice.
How actually did you get the job with Ruth? Was it just purely someone gave you the nod, or did you reply to an advertisement?
Well, I was actually working in a frame store. I worked a lot. I worked as a bicycle messenger boy. I cut grass. I painted windows. I did anything like people do when they're young to survive. They always wanted to be a photographer, but I did what I could. I was working in a frame store. I just got my work into a few galleries, on the ground level, and a gallery in Los Angeles, the Stephen White Gallery, had signed a contract with her to represent her exclusively for 2 years. She needed a printer to help her print her work, and the gallery owner said, you want to have a job? So I, worked in the frame store during the day, and at night I ran up the Divisadero Hill, and I would print Ruth Bernhard, and then we worked together for a long time.
10 years is is a good fair time, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it was.
Any difficulties? Was there a time where she took a photograph, you print it a particular way, and she went, no, I don't want it done like this, Michael. This is how I want it done.
No, I mean, by the time I came along, her career as a photographer really was over. She'd had carbon monoxide poisoning. She didn't feel comfortable really printing her work. And all the negatives I worked on, they dated from the 30s, 1930s onwards, into, I think her last negative was 1975. And I came on the scene in 1978, 1979. And so we were printing these existing negatives.
Right. And then basically your career's going to start kicking off, so to speak, for want of description after that, or did you?
Yeah, it really did. It started really in the late 70s. I mean, the photographs that I exhibit now and are published, they date from 1973, 74. But I really only started understanding the art world, the commercial art world, commercial art business when I moved to the States. And then when I started working with Ruth Bernhard, she worked in the art business, basically. She consigned work to galleries, had exhibitions in museums, had the occasional book published. This is all something that I wanted to do, so I could get the inside scoop a little bit on how these things worked. So in San Francisco, in 1981, I won something called the Imogen Cunningham Award, and that really launched my career as such, because I had two big exhibitions in San Francisco. I'd had smaller exhibitions before, but nothing had really taken off. And they were both very successful. I had a lot of press. And from that point onwards, I've basically continued. I've done a lot of commercial work along the way. I've taught, given lectures, done workshops, lots of other things to keep going. But by and large, the main thrust of my career has been fine art photography.
Yeah. Let's talk briefly about the commercial side of the photography that you got involved with. What sort of commercial work were you involved with? Was it, like you said, yes to anything?
I probably would say yes to anything, but I was very fortunate in that I found a good agent in London named Tiggy McConaughey through Hamilton's Gallery, and she had me, working for British Rail and then working for a lot of car companies. I photographed for Mercedes, for Rolls-Royce, for Volvo, for BMW, all sorts of things. Some of the campaigns were absolutely wonderful. For example, I remember driving in the Isle of Skye tied to the bonnet of a Rolls-Royce, photographing the road. This was before, digital stuff where you could put movement and things.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Create it in camera, on film. But lots of I was in helicopters on mountains and lots of great commercial stuff. It's all on my website if people want to know.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm known for my fine artwork, but actually I've had a whole parallel career doing commercial work. So some side really backed the work that I've been doing in the fine arts.
Is commercial work still part of your calendar, so to speak, now, or are you more sort of fine art?
If somebody offers me a job, I'd certainly say yes still. But
never say never.
No, I mean, my most recent great commercial campaign was for HSBC Bank.
Right.
For 3 years, I basically toured the world for them, photographing emerging economies.
Yeah.
I got to go to many countries that I'd never been before on somebody else's expense, and produced a lot of work for them, but also for myself.
Yeah.
Frankly, as you probably know, I don't do any digital work. All my work is still traditional Hasselblad cameras. I have the film processed. I print everything myself. And most ad agencies, they need things instant. They need things global. So you take something on a digital camera, it goes through the computer, and everybody around the world immediately sees it. This is not the way that I work. My work is much slower than that.
Yeah.
So I found 99% of commercial jobs just disappear already. It's not they're not interested.
No.
But occasionally something will turn up again. I hope.
It's interesting little segues they say in the States that you've brought the subject round with regards to gear, because I'll come back to your style in a second, because that's different. But let's talk about the gear. I've watched many of the YouTube documentaries on yourself.
One of the camera falling in the lake.
Exactly, the camera falling in the lake, and you're getting up to your waist in snow out in Japan somewhere to take that photograph of that tree.
Of course, I had a terrible cold. I had my camera sitting on this tripod,
Yeah.
and I turned around to have a sneeze and blow my nose, and the camera fell in the water. So that's a great video.
Can I ask how much that camera was?
You are now on candid camera. Yeah.
How much was that camera?
I ended up giving it to Hasselblad in Japan. It was so waterlogged. I tried to get it fixed, but there's no way. It had too much dirt in it.
And even that, you didn't think about switching to digital. You were still entrenched in this film.
Digital will survive, Dara, I assure you.
Yeah, exactly. So let's. So it's Hasselblad, obviously a selection of lenses. It's a medium format camera, which I'm not really familiar with. Could you, for those that aren't familiar with medium format photography, could you?
Well, this is the camera that went to the moon. You know, this is
I remember seeing it.
This is a very traditional camera. I should have had the camera equipment here, but it sits downstairs in the darkroom. It is a medium format camera. You know, Hasselblad have been around for years and years. For me, it's like an expensive lawnmower almost. You know, it has all these parts. That's you know, it doesn't take batteries. It doesn't have bells and whistles. It's the most basic type. So some of these parts of the equipment I've had since the 80s. You know, they still go strong. You know, you basically have a camera body, you have a camera viewing mechanism, you have a lens, and you have a magazine, film magazine. Mm-hmm. And those parts are all interchangeable. So I have lots of film magazines, I have lots of camera bodies, lots of lenses, and you know, and I bang them around and drop them and smash them and get them dirty and waterlogged, and you know, they get dropped in snow. Sometimes they go in sand, but they're all cleanable somehow.
Yeah,
you can. They just seem to go on forever, which I love.
And obviously, as you say, one very important factor there, you mentioned there's no battery involved with these type of cameras. I'm right there. So, of course, working in cold conditions, like your photography you did in Japan, which I saw on the YouTube, the camera's still going to work. It's not going to freeze up because it's dependent on a battery.
Exactly. Yes. And long exposures too. I often do 12-hour exposures, 10-hour exposures.
Wow.
You know, it's sometimes a little bit difficult with digital equipment. You know, I know these days you kind of do constant exposure, and then you add them all in at the end and paste them together and put them in the melting pot. But it's kind of not my style.
Not your style at all, is it? No, that's true. How many lenses? Can I just ask this geeky question? How many lenses do you have?
All right. Well, my typical gear is that I refuse to travel with anything that I can't carry to begin with in a backpack. So because I need to be flexible. I need to move around. So I have one tripod or perhaps another one in the suitcase sometimes, because sometimes I set two tripods out at night with cameras. I always have two camera bodies. Mm-hmm. There's one I may drop in the lake. I always have 5 lenses. It goes from 250 millimeter, which is equivalent to probably 160, 170 millimeter and 35 millimeter.
Right. Okay.
Down to 40. Which is probably the equivalent of about 25 millimeter, something like that. I'm not sure. I'm not really very technical.
It's interesting because I don't know those splits that you've given there. I'm just about getting used to 1.5 crop to 35 millimeter equivalent. I know a 23.
Oh, right. Okay. Well,
about 40 mil.
Some of the people listening know all about this.
Yeah, exactly. There will be some landscape photographers.
Basically, they go from wide lens to telephoto. That's the main thing, and then and stand it in the middle. And I can't say, people say, what's your favorite lens? And I haven't a clue.
No.
Because I use them, they all get used, which is great.
That's super. There's nothing worse than having gear in a bag which is never used. Yeah.
And the other, I mentioned briefly before, the other camera I use is this little holder camera.
This is the other side of the Michael Kenna that we don't know.
It's a plastic camera. So when you're doing other stuff, like if you're in a city or something, you don't want to be carrying around gear or you don't have a tripod. I walk around with this plastic camera, and it's great. And a lot of photographs, not a huge amount, but a number of photographs in my body of work are made with the plastic camera.
Amazing.
So
this is interesting for me because very few, if I'm right in saying, very few film photographers that I've known, the likes of David Bailey and Lord Lichfield and those sort of guys involved, wouldn't actually print their work. They Soul Lighter is another classic. They would make the image, send it off to the printer. They would do the work at that stage. you're not that animal, are you? You do your work and you do your printing.
Yeah, I mean, there are many schools of thought, and there are many ways of going through the process. I personally believe that I need to print everything.
Hmm.
Um, there are many conscious and unconscious decisions, creative decisions, technical decisions, aesthetic decisions you make when you're out photographing.
Yeah.
You come back with a negative. You get to do that all again in the darkroom, basically. Whether you crop it, print it a certain way, what the interpretation is. It's very, very subjective.
Hmm.
And I can't personally understand delegating that to somebody else. It's possible I did, and they may actually come out with a better print than I make, but it wouldn't be my print.
This is it. It comes to a point where someone says, "Is that your work?" And yes, it is my work because I photographed it, but then someone's gone and printed it, and as you say, it's taken it effectively out of your control almost.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, Ansel compared it to the score and the performance. The negative is the score in some ways, and it can be performed in many, many ways.
Uh-huh.
Different printers should be able to produce work very, very differently.
Yeah.
I actually love being in the darkroom. I love printing. It really is the kind of the fulfillment of the whole creative process, and I can't really second guess or predict the decisions I'm going to make until I'm actually physically doing it. It's a bit like a sculptor. You're kind of finding your way, finding what's inside that piece of clay or marble or whatever it is, and something will come out. Sometimes it doesn't come out, of course, and you have to reprint it, or it's not very successful.
Well, this is what I was going to ask you actually, because obviously from my aspect, I work with my work on Lightroom, and I can do that. It's non-destructive on the file and so on and so forth. With yourself, you've got to start from the basics. I worked in my own personal darkroom for a very brief period of time.
Yeah.
Getting the right exposure for when you're doing the print and so on and so forth, which I found very, very tedious. But obviously, with your experiences you've built through, obviously you can look at a negative and say, well, I think I know what I've got to expose the paper to at that particular exposure. But could you say roughly how many test runs you go through before you're pleased with an initial print?
There's no. I don't even know what the average is, because I find that sometimes I can go in and 3 or 4 prints later, I'm basically at the point where the interpretation is where I want it to be.
Yeah.
Other negatives, I can be there 5 or 6 hours later and still tearing my hair out trying to get what I want. And it's not, sometimes it's the technical aspect of the negative. Sometimes it's just the part of the image, what you're trying to bring out the image. Sometimes you just can't actually find it in there. There's something in there, but you can't get it somehow.
Yeah,
I'm often the ones that you struggle with all day that are the most interesting at the end of it.
Yeah, I understand. And
I printed one just yesterday that I know that I'd spent a whole day printing it, but I only managed to get 5 prints, and they actually sold. But this was 2 years ago. I printed it once, and I got a print order from Beijing of all places.
Wow.
But it got taken in Russia, and the print order came from Beijing. And so I'm printing it here in Seattle. I mean,
well, that's
got a global
business.
That's very strange.
Goes to show how small this business is and how small this world is. Can I just ask you a question? When you do this traveling, everyone in the film days, and I say film days, obviously still people using film these now, but
we're not dead yet.
No, they're not dead yet. You're quite right. Did you have any problems with going through security and scanners and that thing, or do you have a different process for transferring your work from one country to another?
That's probably the worst part of the whole process for me, is actually taking film through airports. I know Sebastião Salgado, for example, basically gave up film because he'd just have 500 rolls of film. He could never get through any airports. Yeah. So yes, that is an issue. I find that my film, if it goes through 2 or 3 X-rays, it makes no difference. I mean, I've tested it a number of times. It's absolutely fine. So whenever I can, I have hand inspection. So all American airports give you hand inspection. Most European airports do not.
Right.
Asia will give you a hand inspection. You never quite know exactly which airport you're going through. Having said that, I also like to have my film processed, and I like to buy my film wherever I'm photographing. If I'm in China, I buy my film in China. I usually have it processed in Japan. If I'm in Europe, I have the film processed in Paris because I know there's a good lab there. If I'm in America, I have it processed here in Seattle or in New York. So there are labs kind of scattered around. You don't have to carry the film everywhere with you. And that's kind of one of the aberrations of my process is that I'm happy to give 100 rolls of film to a lab. I have no idea what chemicals they're using.
No.
But I'd like that unpredictable quality to it. You know,
which is why you like the Holger, isn't it?
Film comes out slightly differently, but that's actually, it's a lot of fun somehow, kind of not to really control that part. And it's a very techie thing, you know, processing film. It's actually very boring, I find. There's no creativity involved. It's a very craftsman sort of thing to do. So I always delegate that.
So let's talk about film very briefly. Is there one type of film that you stick to all the time? Is that film readily available around the world?
I stick to Tri-X for the most part, Kodak Tri-X, because it is readily available. But you know, in my days, I photographed with anything and everything. You know, if I'm in Japan, I'd buy Fuji. If I'm in England, I might buy Ilford. You know, I used to buy Agfa. And again, I like the variations. You know, I like that I don't really have complete control over what's going on. It's one of the reasons I really like night photography. That I haven't a clue what's happening. Sometimes you leave a camera out for 10 hours. You don't know what's going to go by.
No, exactly.
But it's
really interesting. A lot of fun. I've just been doing a little bit of street night photography. I've been on the 3 events, and it really is very, very interesting. It is great fun. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't know whether it'd be nice to go out and see these people and take photographs of people in the street," but really, it's just superb. Everyone's out to have a great time, so you just it is good, really fun. Let's talk about your style, Michael. Where actually did this fantastic, I've got to say fantastic, and I mean that most sincerely, this minimalistic, simplistic type photography, where did that come from?
I used to ask Ruth Bernhard about things like this, and she'd say, "Well, where did your autograph come from?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She says, "Well, you sign in a certain way. Nobody told you to sign like that. You just do it, and nobody else can do it like you do it. It's like we all have our identical, our completely unique autographs somehow.
Yeah.
Style is something like that. It comes both from within. It's completely genetic. It comes from experience, how you grew up, all your influences." And then as you go along, I think it depends upon what you're exposed to. So I think my greatest influence after my whole upbringing and European background and so forth was going to Asia. So I started going to Asia in the 80s. I started photographing in a very dedicated manner, really around 2000, 2001 onwards, and have been ever since. And that greatly influenced how I saw things. Suddenly started reading right to left, bottom to top. I love the way the kanji characters would be incorporated onto the scrolls. Everything was minimalistic. Even the haiku poetry of Japan. Just a few words would suggest a huge amount. And having said that, I go back and I look at my photographs from 1975, and they're minimalistic. It's just the way that I was born somehow.
Yeah.
And I kind of moved myself into the area where it actually worked, into a profession where it worked, into photographing, subject matter where it works. So, I actually don't know. I don't know where it comes from exactly.
I think, in actual fact, what Ruth said to you there is something which I've never, ever thought about. Where did your autograph, your signature come from? And isn't it strange? My signature, people say,
we all sign.
Why did you start signing your name like that? So, that's a very pathetic words she said there. So these ideas that come about, there's the body of work you did, which Brooks Jensen, who was a guest of mine a couple of weeks ago, with was it Calais Silk, which he showed in his magazine.
Calais Lace. Yes,
Calais Lace. That's correct. So this was these bodies of work which you created, all bringing this simplistic type ideals together. How did the love affair, I'm going to use that term, of Asia come about? Was it just intrigued you, or was it the fact that you're living relatively close to that side of the world than we are? Was it because of that?
No, again, it's hard to articulate. I just knew that when I went to Asia, it felt like home somehow. I had infinity, a resonance. There was a connection Certainly in Japan, it's not that much different from England, where I come from. It's a fairly small country. There's a lot of water. It's all lived in, basically, or lived on. I often say that, the general area of my work is about the juxtaposition, the connection, the relationship, the confrontation even between the landscape, the organic elements, and the structures that we humans leave behind, the footprints, the traces, the memories, the stories. So you go to a place like, and that recurs to all of my work, whether it's seafronts, landscapes, garden, it's throughout. If you go to Japan, every inch has been worked on. It's been touched. You can feel the presence. So I photograph the natural landscape sometimes, but I'm not like an Ansel Adams. I don't want to go out there photographing these huge, beautiful vistas. I photograph more of the intimacy, just the very single, the line of beautiful fence, or some, a few pebbles, but they're obviously been somehow arranged. This posts, or I feel like I instigated the sticks in water school of photography.
Well, there's only one photographer.
I always love photographing sticks in water,
Well, there's only one photographer that I know that can make the chimney stacks of your local town.
Oh yeah, but that's my upbringing. Widnes is a chemical town.
Exactly. Breathtaking images they are. It's almost romantic as you look at them. You think
very romantic place, Widnes.
How can you? I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're quickly going to go to screen share now.
All right.
Because this is let me just there we go. I hope you can see that.
It's got a blank. Oh yeah, look, that's my website.
There's your website. There's your website.
How about that?
You should be able to see that fully.
Indeed.
And what I'll be able to do, fingers crossed, if I go to that page, double click that, you won't be able to see me now. You'll be
all right. Yes.
So what I'm going to do here, Michael, I'm just going to click through some quick some photographs here, which is for the viewers. This is in Michael's recent work page of michaelkenna.net. I'll be putting all the links onto the blog as I do over the weekend. So as I flick through, Michael, if you've got any stories to tell.
Yes,
this is a great image here for
commercial work before. This, for example, was photographed when I was working for HSBC.
Right.
But I literally only printed it about 2 weeks ago. That's why it's on recent work. It says 2009.
Yeah, 2008. It says, yeah.
But it's very typical that I can go back into the negative archives, up to 30, 40 years ago and find images to print, depending on what I'm working on now.
Yeah. Let's on to the next one. The balloons here. 1993. This was taken in New Mexico.
This is for an exhibition that I'm having in New York in December, and the title of the exhibition is "Oh, the Places You'll Go," from Dr. Seuss.
Lovely.
And so they were looking for something, whimsical that suggested this, adventurer, explorer going to different places. And so I just wandered back through the old archives and found this image. But I only printed it, 2 weeks ago.
You've never printed that before?
No, never. No, I mean, if you photograph all your life, it's amazing how many images at the time you almost don't see. You take it for granted.
Yes.
I photographed a whole balloon festival. I had lots of pictures of balloons. I printed a couple of others, but they weren't so great.
Yeah.
But I just found this one. Here's another. This was also photographed.
2006.
Yeah, another balloon. Again, it's one I haven't printed before.
It's really. I find this amazing that this photograph here was taken in 2014.
Yes, this one.
But and it's obviously these long exposure shots which you were talking about earlier on. But I'm finding this amazing that you've literally never printed an image that you took in 1993.
Well, I photograph a lot. I have negative archives. Cupboards and cupboards and cupboards full of negative binders. It's impossible to print everything.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah. Italy, 2008,
Yeah,
Lake
yeah. Again,
Maggiore.
it's just printed recently because I have an exhibition.
Yeah.
It's funny. I have an exhibition coming up in Switzerland in
Mm.
late November, and they asked me if I had any photographs of Switzerland. So I went through my archives and I printed what I thought were photographs of Switzerland, but actually this was on just on the other side of the border,
Just on the
which I only just found out later because Lake Maggiore goes into Switzerland also.
yeah.
No,
No,
that's a Swiss
Swiss
one, yeah.
Alps.
But again, that
1994.
was printed about a month ago,
Right.
1994
Yeah, yeah.
image.
The Matterhorn. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, yeah.
2012. Is that the at Lake Geneva?
It is,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That's again for the Swiss exhibition.
Tell me about this image as we're looking at it, just to give us an idea of exposure, time, and aperture setting.
It's very spread. I have
Would
no
you know
idea
that?
about aperture settings. I don't really record those, but I have a few other little fun cameras that I carry around with. One of them is a kind of panoramic camera. It's a
Right.
food panoramic camera, so occasionally I wander around with that. And it's always handheld, and so it was photographed with this. But it's a straightforward exposure.
Yeah.
See,
Those
this
are
is
the lines.
this is with the Holga camera.
Yes.
That's why you can see the vignetting.
Yeah, the vignetting. Yes, on the edges.
Except
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the middle.
And then more work in Switzerland.
Another old image that I dug out of my archive.
Yeah. I'm just going to switch to publications to show the viewers. And this is Michael's latest book, which is
Yes.
France. And I believe is the main reason for him flying about all over the world, basically to do book signings.
Well, this autumn is busy. I think there are 15 book signings and a lot of exhibitions. And as in this day and age, working in the fine arts in photography, everybody's a photographer these days. Everybody has the camera on the phone everywhere else.
Yeah.
It's really not that easy to be a fine art photographer. And you have to understand that there's a whole business side to it.
Yes.
Going around to all these places, attending openings, having exhibitions, making prints. It's work. It's great work. I'm not complaining at all, but it's work.
But it's interesting you make that point because a lot of professional photographers have said to me that as an amateur, it's just photography, and then as soon as I turn professional, it's 20% photography and 80% is running the business.
Exactly.
You would agree with that? It's
there's a lot of business aspect to it. Yeah. I mean, but most of it I love doing anyway. So it's not, as I say, I love print. Some people hate it, But there's all the, you got to dry mount the photograph, you got to retouch the photograph, you got to sign it, you got to edition, you got to ship it, you got to consign it, you got to invoice it, all this, the stuff.
So with that example, you're saying that the photograph was taken in Russia. It was ordered from Beijing. You've printed it yourself, so the order is coming into Seattle. It's not coming into an agent for it to be sent out. The order is actually coming to you direct, is it? For you to do the work?
Yeah, basically, I run there's myself and I have one assistant.
Okay.
I always manage to keep the operation small, to keep the overhead relatively down. Having said that, I have maybe 30 galleries that represent me globally.
Yeah.
Each of them have consignments of work. Each of them has exhibitions, maybe every other year or so. So you can see there's a lot of continual exhibitions.
Yeah, there are. Yeah. Just looking at your list.
For that. Yeah. But you just have to think. You have a show in Switzerland, they sell 3 or 4 prints. You have a show in Moscow, they sell 3 or 4 prints. You have a show in Beijing, they sell 3 prints. It's basically you have to add it all up. It's a lot of work, a lot of busyness at times.
Yeah.
Keeps the whole kind of ship steaming ahead.
And basically the process of people purchasing your prints is through your website, michaelkenna.net?
It all goes through galleries.
Galleries. Okay.
I've never sold anything basically in my life. Just occasionally at workshops. It's kind of one of the kind I give people a huge discount, but I let the whole retail side be done with the galleries that represent me.
Yeah.
And that seems to work very, very well.
Okay.
I find it difficult to sell your own work, to put a price tag on your own work and kind of do that whole retail thing.
Yeah, there's obviously an intimate value to yourself, but obviously the pricing factor has to be left to, dare I say it, the professionals to say,
yes, yeah,
this photographer is worth X amount, whatever that X is, and it goes on. You mentioned their workshops, Michael. Are you actively involved with workshops, or is it just?
No, I used to when I was much younger. I mean, I find that basically I teach the same thing each time because that's what people want to know.
Yeah.
It lost its attraction. Certainly to me, I find that I have a family. I have 2 young children now again, and I find that if I'm going to be away, I should be photographing or kind of doing the business side of thing. I suspect if I ever retire, then I'll be a decent teacher. But while I'm active,
while you're active, exactly, carry on. But it's so interesting though that so many photographers that I've spoken to. This is show number 31, and I would say nearly 60, possibly 70% of those photographers have said they obviously have their photographic business, but at the same time they do love to share and to teach and to do the workshops. And I suppose really to a degree doing workshops is another form of bringing the pennies in, basically, to put the food on the table, so to speak. It helps, doesn't it? But I think this is one thing that I'm finding, that there are a lot of photographers out there that just love to share not only their work but love to share their ideas and the way they go about their work.
I try to show my work through books and website, Facebook, and things like that.
It's interesting actually with regards to, because you've got Google Plus now, and you've got Flickr, and you've got all these sites where people can view these images of some very, very good photography, I might add. But there's nothing like picking up a book. I've just lined up my Christmas presents with my wife, and she's going, not another photographic book. I better not tell her what I'm going to be buying next week as well.
I got two,
I was just going to say, you got to. Well, at the moment they're reading books up there. I'm going to switch them over soon, but I better not tell her what I'm going to do next week. When, fingers crossed, I can meet you in London when you come.
Oh yeah,
book signing there. Let's keep that a secret. She doesn't watch the show very often, and if she does, I'll stop it at this point.
That's great. She'll edit it.
Yeah, no, I never edit. That's why it's called Live and Uncut. It's never edited.
Okay. So not even my wife, huh?
No. Your future plans, Michael. What's on the horizon for you? Dare I use that terminology?
Well, as a young man of 61, I feel I have at least another 40 years of active photographing.
Good for you. Good for you.
I have no idea. I always feel that I just see what's around the next corner. In terms of future projects, I'm always working on half a dozen projects. Nothing is ever really finished. This big France book came out, but I'll be photographing in France again next week, and I'll go back to Japan and probably Korea and China in January and February, and then we'll see. I find that interesting projects come from left field that you can't really predict, and you don't really know what's going to happen, but something will happen. Somebody will say something, somebody will suggest, or give you an assignment, and then off you go. You're on the next project. But I have plenty to work on. I mean, if I never photographed a day in my life again, I could print for the rest of my life.
And obviously printing is the nub of your interest, isn't it? So you'd be a happy man.
Yes. But I'm also very, very happy, going out photographing. So
I'm going to ask the $64,000 question with regards to mono or color, and obviously I always see your work as a mono artist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Has color ever attracted you in any way?
Tickled my fancy? No, not really. I've done, for example, my senior project when I graduated from the London College of Printing was all in color. Right. My first work in a gallery was in color, and I have done commercial assignments in color.
Yes.
But I find that we see color all the time, I use the example of when I worked as a color printer in a professional lab in London. It's one of my many jobs to get by as a young photographer. I found that if I was off by 5 magenta, 5 cyan, 5, the print was wrong.
Yeah.
There was no element in interpretation somehow, and I didn't like that. When I'm in the darkroom, I like to feel that I can print something very light, very dark, very contrasty, very flat. But I can kind of, it's malleable. It's
manipulated. You can manipulate it. Yeah.
Color's too real for me somehow.
Yeah,
but
it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, in actual fact, because one of my jobs when I used to work in the city, but after that I went into print sales, and I was this would be leaflet type printing.
Yeah.
And when I first sat down next to these minders of these huge 8-color and 6 and 8-color machines, sheet-fed machines going through, the work would come out on the bench and they'd look at it and I'll go, well, that's pretty damn perfect. No, little touch on the old cyan and they'd run another 10 sheets through and no, a little bit more magenta, and I just couldn't quite work out. They're just a fantastic eye, these print minders. Of course, it's gone now because it's all computerized and they just put the colorimeter on it, whatever it's called, densitrometer. Boom, oh, it's that. Dial it in and away it goes. But the ability of these minders to say, a little bit more cyan, a little bit more black. It was truly amazing to watch these guys work, which is very similar to what you're saying, with going the other way on the basis that if you cyan out, it's causing a difficulty for you. And they prefer to work in a mono, and who am I to argue? The mono work you produce.
Well, it's not a matter of what's better or worse. It's just it's personal subjectivity. I think you really need to find out what works for you as an individual.
Yeah.
Black and white is what tickles my fancy.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, we come to the point in the show where let's talk about your favorite photographer, Michael. It doesn't have to be.
Well, it's my favorite photographer still is Bill Brandt, probably. I mean, I've been highly influenced by a whole set of European photographers. They're all dead, like Joseph Sudek, Mario Giacomelli, Eugene Auger, Brassai. And Bill Brandt is the king of them all for me. He always has been. I still find that I printed something yesterday and I said, well, that just looks like a Bill Brandt. After 40 years of photographing, the influence is still very, very powerful. And I've always felt that all photographers, they have to, in a sense, imitate other photographers, gain their influences, and then find their own vision.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just kind of can't completely get away from the big influence, and Bill Brandt is certainly mine.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, actually, that because a lot of people say, oh, you're copying someone else's style there, but when you think about it, I used to teach golf quite a bit, and we used to say, who's your favorite golfer? And they would say David Duval, obviously Tiger Woods was always mentioned, Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, and they'd say, well, think about that individual when you're hitting the shot. I do find a lot of sort of similarities in both golf and photography, because it's a very sort of personal thing. And of course, if these were generally young lads from about the age of about 10 through to about 17, if they stuck with that vision, then invariably you could see their swing developing and their style of play developing, which is very similar to photography, as you say. Let's talk about the person that's inspired you the most. This doesn't necessarily have to be a photographer, but who would that person be, Michael?
I don't know. I could come up with many people, but I think I do have to return back to photography, and it probably is Ruth Bernhard in that respect. Just because I spent so long with her, and she was so profoundly influential. Both personally and professionally, I think.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say that, because those simple description you made of the signature is just that's a unique thing to say to someone who's looking to.
I mean, she was a wonderful photographer, but she always felt that her legacy would remain behind in her teaching. She always regarded herself as a teacher, even before she was a photographer.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So a great influence, a great role model, I think.
Well, that certainly is. That's a lovely thing. She died 2006, was it?
I can't remember now. No, 2007 actually. Yes.
2007,
Yeah.
2007, yeah, yeah. Michael, absolutely superb. I know you're dying to get back into that dark room. I can see you twitching
Yes,
there.
I'm three-quarters of the way through a print.
Can I just say, absolutely superb talking to you. So thank you so much for sparing your time in such a busy schedule. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing you next week. I'm going to pop up
Great.
to you in London and have a little chat. And
All right, Beatles and
fingers,
hugs. But I have no idea what time it is. But I think it's on the 20th.
I will find out. I will give him a call, Mr. Beaton.
Wonderful. Please
I'm
do.
calling him. I've just seen him.
Giles.
I've just seen him advertising his Photographers 14 exhibition on the YouTube. So I've got to give him a call and have a chat with him. But
all right, very good. All right.
Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Seattle. How about that? I'm in London, you're in Seattle, and the world's never been so small.
Absolutely.
We've got to thank Google Plus and all the other guys that do this for us. Anyway,
Right.
folks, thank you so much for joining me. We've had a few viewers live, which has been fantastic.
Lovely.
It's that time of the day and the time of the show when I turn around to you and say, if you're going out shooting this weekend,
You opened your bottle of Guinness now, isn't it?
well, I probably will do actually. Folks, leave your camera bag at home. Have a very good evening. Bye for now.
Right, take care. Thanks, Paul. Bye now.